Our speaker tonight is Carey Smoak. Carey retired 4 years ago from a career in epidemiology, and 2 years ago he began volunteering with a ministry called Apologetics on Mission, which has a worldwide focus on evangelizing through apologetics. Carey joined AOM earlier this year for a speaking tour of South Africa, Kenya, and Uganda. Carey is a Reasons to Believe apologist and has been associated with Let the Evidence Speak and its predecessor, the Reasons to Believe San Jose, California chapter, for the past 5 years. Please join me in welcoming Carey Smoak.
Thank you for this opportunity. Some of you have noticed my background with the hippo there with this mouth open. That's from a safari trip that my wife and I took to Tanzania, and this is in the Serengeti. We love shows like Nature and Nova on PBS, and decided we need to see it in person. So that's where my background comes from for tonight's presentation. I'm going to talk about a mission trip to Uganda earlier this year. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. When I was born, my parents didn't take long for them to realize that there was something physically wrong with me. Oh, several months after I was born. And for my father was a pastor, and we moved a lot. And it wasn't until we got to a town in Northern California that I got correctly diagnosed. And I had been held back by that time 3 times from kindergarten through third grade because of my disability. And I spent a year at a boarding school in San Francisco for neurologically handicapped children. And that's where my life turned around, really, that they got my neurologic conditions under control. They realized was actually pretty smart in math. But it was during this time that I remember one time my dad was preaching, and I felt something tugging at my heart, but I couldn't figure out what it was while my dad was preaching. And normally I was a very active kid, like everybody after church running around, but we lived in a parsonage right next to the church. And I remember going straight home afterwards, and my mom came home and said, "What's wrong?" Because normally, like I said, I was very active. Well, I explained to her what happened in church, and she said, "Let's wait for Dad to get home." So Dad came home and explained the gospel to me and knelt beside me on our bedside and prayed for me to become a follower of Jesus Christ. So I was baptized, and my mom has written in one of her Bibles that I was baptized on April 28th, 1963. So I grew up in a Christian family, basically. But that's just a very brief outline of my life. But I like sharing a little bit about my testimony. I do have a Bachelor of Science degree, double majoring in biology and chemistry, then a Master of Science in Public Health and Epidemiology from Loma Linda University. I started my doctorate in public health, but due to some unfortunate experiences there, I had to drop out. And so I fall into the all but dissertation category. It was quite frustrating to have to drop out when I had done so much of my research for my dissertation, but I was not able to complete that. I did work for 38 years, and as Kirby mentioned, I retired 4 years ago. I spent 14 years in academia, 24 years in pharma and biotech, and I have 69 publications to my credit as an epidemiologist. So that's a little bit. On a more personal side, I've been married to Carla for 29 years. In January, it will be 30. I'm also at Redwood Chapel in Castro Valley, as an elder and an adult Sunday school teacher. I initially met Kirby. There used to be a program or a conference at Redwood Chapel called BASS, Bay Area Sunday School. And I remember seeing Kirby many times there at Redwood Chapel. I'm also involved in mentoring young adults at Redwood Chapel. This spring, I was able to baptize a young man that I've been discipling. It's now been 2 years since I met him. So I love being around young people and hanging out with them and answering questions. And then I'm involved with Apologetics on Mission. Ben Clifton, who's on this call tonight, is the co-founder, and you'll see his picture in a minute when I go into about the mission trip. So I think I work as a apologetics lecturer right now. Apologetics on Mission has a 16-week course in international apologetics that is being taught. Tomorrow will be the third lesson in the 16 weeks. So I do 2 lectures out of the 16. And then I'm a liaison to Apologetics Uganda, which is an organization that I'll explain in a minute. So if you click on your search for Apologetics on Mission, this is their homepage, Raising Christian Defenders Globally. So some people may know where Uganda is, but I want to make sure everybody kind of understands. So you see here on the map of Africa that Uganda is in the eastern part. The really big nation right next to Uganda, that's the Congo, or used to be called Zaire many years ago. If you zoom in a little bit, you can see that Uganda is surrounded by the Congo, the Sudan, Kenya, Tanzania, and Rwanda. So if you look there, probably the most recognizable town is Kampala, which is the capital, and Entebbe is the airport that services Kampala. Down on the kind of lower left of the Uganda map, you should see a town that's Mbarara. So you'll see in the next screen where we went on this trip. Now you can see much bigger there Mimbara, and if you look to the left, you should see a town called Bush Inyi, and just a little bit to the left of that, you should see a town called Ishaka. That's where our mission trip was located. This is a very strategic town because, as I'll show in a minute, they have a university there that has 20,000 students at the university. And there's a church called Ishaka Community Church that is mostly made up of students and young adults that are either attending that college or have graduated from that university. So 80% of the church is 18 to 30 years old, and they have several hundred members. So Ashaka attracts people from all over Eastern Africa to attend this university. So this church is like a receiving church. They receive new students each year, and then they have them for like 3 to 5 years to train them, and they are really interested in learning about apologetics. They're excited to learn about apologetics. And then when these students graduate, if they go back to their home country, they are prepared to use apologetics in their home country. So it's an amazing situation there in Ashaka, which is not a major town in Uganda, but it's a very strategic one because of their church and the university there. So I'll just give a quick outline of what I'm going to talk about tonight. I'm going to introduce the team that went on this mission trip. I'm going to talk about this Kampala International University, or we'll call it KIU in Ashaka. We'll talk about a prison visit that happened on Good Friday. We'll talk about the Good Friday service at Ishaka Community Church. Then we'll talk about the apologetics conference and graduation that happened, what happened on Easter, and then some various activities, and then a kind of brief update on what's happened since the mission trip. So that's a kind of outline of where I'm going. So first, let's look at the team that went there. It included Ben, who's the co-founder of Apologetics on Mission, Bridget, who is working on 2 master's degree, and myself. So here's a picture of an Apologetics Uganda. Apologetics Uganda is an organization that is developing their own apologetics program within Uganda. And it's a ministry that uses apologetics to reach students and young professionals in Uganda. They're in the process of developing their own apologetics course, and they use things like podcasts and other social media to get the word out, like TikTok. And they can go directly into classrooms. One of the things I found interesting in going to Uganda is that you can talk about God in the classroom. So they can go directly into classrooms. And every Saturday morning, they have a group that meets at a Shaka community church that is looking at apologetics. They meet, I think, for about 2 or 3 hours. So these are people that are really interested in learning, and it's very impressive the work that they're doing. So throughout the talk, you'll probably hear a little bit more about Apologetics Uganda and the work that they're doing. So I act as a liaison between Apologetics on Mission and Apologetics Uganda. So I keep up with the guys that are doing the work in Apologetics Uganda, have monthly meetings with them. So here's Ben, uh, who was our leader for the trip. This is Bridget, and she's the one that's working on 2 master's degrees at the same time. And this is me on the trip. So these are the good pictures from Easter Sunday. We did not always look like this on the mission trip, but these are the best photos. And then at the hotel, on the left is our driver named Deo. There's Ben. The person in the middle with the sunglasses is Moses, who's the president of Apologetics Uganda. Then there's myself, Bridget, and a person named Emmy from Rwanda. So this is our arrival. We flew into Rwanda and picked up Emmy, and then our driver drove us to Ishaka. And I was so happy about that because the first time I went to Uganda, we flew into Entebbe and took the road from Entebbe to Ishaka. And it was like a 6 hour Ugandan massage going over the bumpy roads. So this was much preferred. Going from Rwanda up to Ashaka was much, much smoother and much more enjoyable, and only took about 4 hours instead of 6. So much preferred. And here's some of us sitting around. We would usually eat. You see in the background in the tent there with the tables. Here we're just kind of hanging out and talking for a little bit. But the accommodations and service were nice on this trip, although the Wi-Fi was not always reliable. But anyway, I want to talk about once we got to the hotel the next day on Thursday, the day before Good Friday, we went to Kampala International University, KIU, in Ishaka. And there, this is really interesting. They have more than 20,000 students and they're all in fields like medicine, pharmacy, nursing, engineering, very technical, highly skilled type of professions. And all of them, at least all the people I've encountered, speak English very well in these professions. So it's a kind of high tech area. Ben spoke to engineering students about God and science. Bridget and I did lectures to medical school students. Bridget lectured twice on human sexuality, a biblical perspective on human sexuality. That's one of her master's degree programs in that area. I actually lectured 3 times in one day on different subjects. The first one I talked about was transmutation of species and why genetic and epigenetic factors really point to the idea that transmutation of species is not possible. I also talked about human evolution. We've all heard that chimpanzees and humans are 99% similar in their genetics, but people like Fuzz Rana at RTB and others have said the real percent is probably much closer to 90%. And so I explained why the idea that humans evolved had a common ancestor, there's problems with that. And the third one, I was specifically asked because my career was in epidemiology to talk about my career in epidemiology. And interestingly, this third lecture was that the professor was a Muslim. So it was very interesting giving a lecture in an audience where there were Muslims. And after my talk, this Muslim professor came up to me, shook my hand, and said to the class how much he appreciated me for talking about how a Christian worldview supports scientific research. I talked a lot about different things in science and how the Bible supports scientific research. So that was quite a highlight having a Muslim thank me for talking about my Christian worldview. Here are just some pictures of the medical school, and you can see it's not probably like a high class medical school, or this is actually engineering that Ben is talking at. And like we would see at a UC Berkeley or UC San Francisco, theirs is much more simple. But here is Ben talking to students, engineering students, about God and science. Here is Bridget talking at KIU to medical students, and she's doing a presentation on human sexuality. And the particular slide that she is showing is called the genderbread uh, person. So not gingerbread, but gender bread. So she was very good. The students were very actually interested in her talk about, transgenderism and other issues that they're facing also in Uganda, and which we face here all the time in the Bay Area. And here's me giving a presentation on epidemiology. And you can see I'm talking about a case control study of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease that I worked on. If you don't know what Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease is, it's the human form of mad cow disease. And just a little side note, probably one of the most exciting things in my career is one day when I received from Miami, Florida, a human brain of a person that had Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. So I got to deliver it. It was on dry ice. I got to deliver it to our pathologist so that he could confirm that the subject did indeed have Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. So that was an exciting day in my career. So that was the Thursday that we were there at KIU. And the next day, Good Friday, was our prison visit. And that was very interesting. Just one thing to note is that pictures were not allowed in the prison, so I can't show you any pictures or slides of what it was like that day, but it was an amazing day. So we made a prison visit to male prisoners in a minimum security prison in Ishaka and found out many of the men that were in prison were there in like a debtor's prison. So these could be men that were married with children and they could not pay their debts. So they went to prison to work off their debt and eventually left the prison with a little bit of money to go back to their families. So Bennon did a talk, as I recall, on the origin of the Bible, and I did a talk on suffering. And I decided to use the book of Job for the basis of talking about suffering. And I kind of skimmed through the beginning, talking about how Job lost everything, and then at the end, how God gave him double everything. But I told the prisoners that, it's not the point that Job got back everything. The point is he was in a right relationship with God. And so I then talked briefly about them and their need to be in a right relationship with God. Hundreds, maybe up to 1,000 male prisoners attended this talk by Ben and I, and an altar call was given, and they had to translate for the prisoners. So the person that I talked about earlier, Moses, the president of Apologetics Uganda, did the translation. And when the altar call was given, dozens of men stood up to indicate that they wanted to put their faith in Jesus Christ. I was overwhelmed by seeing so many men stand to place their faith in Christ. Probably a couple months after we got back from Uganda, we found out that more than 200 men from the prison were baptized, and I was astounded by that. Another person in Apologetics Uganda named Jackson was the one who informed me about this. I wish I could show you photos, but no photos were allowed at the prison. But it was just an awesome day there to see so many men listening to the gospel and responding to the gospel. The Good Friday service was interesting. You'll see in a minute that they did a play at the Good Friday service, and it commemorates um, the relationship between Laban and Jacob in the Old Testament. And it's something of a tradition for them to reenact the interaction between Laban and Jacob on Good Friday. So Ishaka Community Church put on this Good Friday production, included music, drama, dancing, and preaching. It was a fantastic performance and went on for more than 3 hours. It was just on and on. Their enthusiasm was amazing. So you could see here, they all dress up. This choir did several songs, and you can see how the ladies and gentlemen are dressed. They are really dressed up. And you have to realize they don't have cars to get to church. They either walk or take what's called a boda boda, which is a motorcycle that is used. So they come all dressed up in their best, either by walking or by boda boda. And here's some children performing a dance routine, which was amazing too, to see their enthusiasm for the gospel. And here's some other dancers that get up and perform, and their energy is just amazing. and their enthusiasm for sharing the gospel through dance. Here is a couple of scenes from the play about Laban and Jacob, and you can see they dress up in costumes. And another picture of them in reenacting this between Laban and Jacob. And you see these like bricks that are stacked upon one another in the middle there. And that's to symbolize the agreement between Laban and Jacob. Because when Jacob left Laban, he took everything that belonged to him, and they made an agreement that they would honor each other and made a covenant here. So this is a part of their Good Friday service. And again, you see some drama that clearly presents the gospel, representing Christ dying for us. So it's a very dramatic evening at the Good Friday service. You clearly hear the gospel, you hear great music, you see wonderful dancing, you see a lot of enthusiasm and excitement from people for the gospel. The next day, Saturday, we had to get up and be there and ready to do a mini apologetics conference and also a graduation after lunch. So the conference and graduation was on Saturday, April 19th, and we had this mini conference and a graduation ceremony. More than 70 students attended an apologetics mini conference that morning, that Saturday morning. So, and this is not unusual. They may have like tomorrow, 40 to 50 students, I hear is typical. But for this, we got 70 people to attend. But they are very enthusiastic. They want to learn apologetics. So Ben talked about the Shroud of Turin, which was a fascinating talk. And Bridget again talked about the biblical view of human sexuality. And I was asked to do a presentation on the prosperity gospel. And so I was able to share my experience and knowledge in that area. And the reason is because the prosperity gospel is very big in Africa and especially in Uganda. And so a very needed apologetic there in Uganda. And then the graduation, which was they were given a certificate, was for people who completed the 16-week course, Introduction to Apologetics, offered by Apologetics Unmentioned. As I mentioned earlier, the new course has just begun 2 weeks ago. So these people would have started 1 year ago and finished in the springtime the course, which is taught by Zoom. And so in there were 6 people from Uganda who graduated. There are many others that graduated from other countries, but from Uganda, there were 6. And people in other African countries in the world also earn this certificate in apologetics. And the Ugandan people like to celebrate their certificates with a graduation ceremony. It is a joyous occasion for them, as you'll see in the pictures. So first of all, let's look at some pictures of the conference that we had on Saturday morning. Again, this is Moses on the left, the president of Apologetics Uganda, and Bridget, who came along with us. And they're standing in front of a poster at Kampala International University. This is what the poster looks like without them in front of it. So you can see all the speakers and people that are involved. And on the kind of middle left, you can see Pastor Sam and his wife, Prosy, who's the pastor of the Shaka Community Church. And here's a picture of Bridget while Ben is giving his presentation on the Shroud of Turin. This little one just climbed up into the lap of Bridget, and Bridget was helping to focus the child on what Ben was presenting that day on the Shroud of Turin. And there were not a lot of children, but they were very loving, the ones that were there, and I enjoyed interacting with the children too. So here's Ben talking about the Shroud of Turin and his evidence and research on that. Here's Bridget. Her title of her talk is Contemporary Challenges to the Christian Faith and specifically biblical sexuality. She really is a good speaker on this topic, and the people really enjoyed. They really related to her because she's their age. She's in her early 20s, and a lot of these students are her age also. So I think there was a good chemistry between Bridget and the students. And here's me talking about the prosperity gospel. So you can see some of the students that were in attendance that day. And again, there was about 70 of them that day. After lunch, we had a panel discussion answering questions from our presentations. And the moderator on the far left with the microphone is Dr. Cedric, who's a surgeon. And so he was asking the questions of the panelists, which was Ben, Moses, myself, and Bridget. We each answered questions, and Dr. Cedric was the moderator. So here's the graduation. They really like to get dressed up in graduation attire. And so we put on caps and gowns and had a little ceremony for these 6 students. So here are the 6 students that graduated that day, and you can see the big smiles on their faces, and they are very happy and excited to get their certificates. Here's a picture of them with their certificates. On the far right, you can see the tall person there. His name is Jackson, and the young lady next to him is his girlfriend. And hopefully one day they will be married in the future. So that was Saturday. Easter was another joyous occasion. We got up and Easter Sunday, Ben preached an Easter sermon, and testimonies were given by Bridget and myself in that service. There was more than 2 hours of music, dancing, and drama prior to Ben's sermon. Then on Sunday afternoon, our hotel treated us to a fabulous lunch and a tour of their farm. They actually grow produce that they use in their cooking. So here's Ben preaching on Easter Sunday, all nicely dressed up. And here we are outside of the church, Shaka Community Church. You can see Pastor Sam sitting down, and his wife Prosy is in between Ben and myself. And so we had a great time that day. Just a wonderful Easter service. Here we are. This is the hotel that took us to their farm that day. So we went back home, changed out of our church clothes, and got more casual and enjoyed their service there, the lunch. The young lady on the left with the white dress, she's kind of short, but boy, she is a powerhouse. She is a medical doctor herself, and she is full of energy and excitement, and lots of other people there too. You can see in this picture. So it was an exciting time there. So next day was Monday, and we had various activities that day. First, there was a meeting with the leaders of Apologetics Uganda about a training center. They want to develop their own place where they can meet and develop their own apologetics program. And so Apologetics Uganda received electronic equipment from Apologetics on Mission for the training center. So this will allow them to do things like to record quality podcasts. And so that's how the equipment can be used to advance the training of people of Uganda in apologetics, and also to be outreach to people that need to hear the gospel through videos on TikTok and podcast and other social media. So that is very useful for them. Next, we had a meeting as what is called the Discipleship House, or for short, the D House. And three men who are leaders in Apologetics Uganda live at the Discipleship House, or D House. One is a doctor who is also a pastor, and then there's two pharmacists who are actually also pastors at Ashaka Community Church. So these men are not only involved in teaching apologetics, they help children. They help to care for 14 street children from Ashaka, and I think the numbers have increased since that time. And one of the young men that are women, child, should say, that they have helped has gone on to college. So a woman also lives on site with the children to help with their care. So let's look. Here are the children at the time in April, and you can see Emmy from Rwanda, Ben, and myself, and Bridget again holding a child. She was like a magnet for children. But this is a very modest place that they live in. But these all are just people that were young people, children that were found on the streets of Ashaka, and they are being raised to know God because of the people that live there, and they really care for them. They do go to school and they do get a housing and food. Then we met at the pastor's house, Pastor Sam. We had a mid-afternoon meal at his house with more than 30 students in medicine, pharmacy, engineering, and nursing. Each of these more than 30 students introduced themselves and gave a brief testimony about how apologetics has impacted their lives. Studying over and over, we heard that studying apologetics has strengthened their faith and given them the ability to give reasons for their faith to people who need to hear the gospel and need to be saved. One particular young lady wants to take the 16-week course. I hope she signed up for it now, now that it started. But at that point, she wanted to take the course so that she can learn how to answer her Muslim friends. And by the way, Uganda is roughly a Christian nation. The majority and Muslims may be minority, but Christian in Uganda can mean anything from uh, Catholic to Orthodox to Protestant to prosperity gospel. So it's a very inclusive group in Uganda. But this young woman wanted to specifically know to how share her faith with her Muslim friends. So here's our mid-afternoon meal. It was delicious. Uh, it was just fantastic. Everything that we had on the trip was delicious. Nothing to get sick about. I mean, it was just wonderful food all the time. And then we're crowded into the living room of Pastor Sam's house, and we're hearing testimonies from the more than 30 students that attended. And again, that was when one of the young ladies shared about wanting to learn how to witness to her Muslim friends. And then Tuesday, April 22nd, we went on a safari about, an hour away from Ashaka. And it was a nice treat after being in ministry for several days. We really needed a break after all that activity. And so here's just a picture of an elephant that we saw on the safari. It was a nice break and nice day to have to do something different before we headed back home. Well, since the mission trip that we took, I just want to report there's a lot I could tell, but I'll just share uh, one particular thing. Recently, Apologetics Uganda participated with other ministries, other apologetic ministries, to host an apologetics conference in Kampala. And on the Sunday evening of that conference, September 28th, there were approximately 2,000 students from 6 universities that came to the conference. And Ben Clifton was one of the speakers at that conference. He made another trip to Uganda and Zimbabwe in September. So that's just one update. There is so much that is going on in Uganda. I could go on, but I just want to give this just one update. So, in conclusion, yes, I want to go back in 2026 to Uganda, and it's in the planning stages when we would go back. And I just want to end by saying we serve a big God. I'm really blessed in my retirement years to be able to do what I'm doing through Apologetics Uganda and Apologetics on Mission. I'm excited to be able to return sometime in 2026. So thank you for your attention, and I will stop my sharing.
Carey is eager to return to Uganda next year to continue ministering to those who are equally eager to learn about the gospel. He did not want to detract from his message to you tonight to ask for your help, but I would like to encourage each of you to prayerfully consider helping Carey make this follow-up trip possible. So you can instantly reach Apologetics on Mission to make your donation using this QR code. Here's a direct link to the AOM website. Just click on Giving and be sure to designate your gift to Carey, since there are several others also trying to plan mission trips.
So, so Carey, I was pleased to see that you are an elder there at Redwood Chapel. I I taught, well, I've spoken at a number of Bass sessions in the past, and Redwood Chapel has a very strong young earth leaning. So it's good that it's good that you're there to help pull it the other way a bit.
Yes, it's constantly a something I tiptoe around and try to be uh, no, not antagonistic about, because I all believe that we're all part of the same preaching the gospel. So
Yeah.
yes.
And Sabina had a question too.
Oh, I thought you had a question too.
No.
Yeah, we actually both have questions, but I'll go first. So you meant, I appreciated that you spoke about the prosperity gospel in Africa, because I have heard that it's a huge thing, and a number, some of the Christians are Christians hoping that God will improve their economic circumstance, which is very understandable that that's desired. But you mentioned something about your own life, the
Hmm.
experience with it in college. So if you're up for telling us a little more, I
Your
always like personal stories.
your experience with prosperity gospel.
How did
Yes,
God make you a billionaire?
yes. I actually got involved in the prosperity gospel from my mid 20s to mid 30s. I've seen Kenneth Copeland, Kenneth Hagin, Benny Hinn, all the big names that you know about. And so I certainly, for about 10 years, was very familiar. And it was Hank Hanegraaff's book, Christianity in Crisis, that really helped me. And going back, I was raised Southern Baptist, and there's a little booklet called The Baptist Faith and Message by Herschel Hobbs. And I just went back and started studying, and God led me out of that. So I understand very well what the prosperity gospel teaches. And with the Christianity in Crisis, I understand very well where there are points that are not Christian. And so my presentation was, here's a problem with what the prosperity gospel said, and I was able to share some of my personal experience.
Good.
Thank you.
There's an excellent little book by Costi Hinn. I don't know if you've read that. Benny Hinn's nephew that
No, I haven't.
exposes. Yeah, very good book.
Okay.
John Cano, you had your hand up next, I think.
Yes, thank you. Um, Thanks for the crash course on Uganda too. So just some questions on Uganda, and I'll start off with a kind of like a dumb observation. So basically, practically all the people there you interface with speak and read English. You didn't have to do any translations, or none of
Only
your
in
materials, or your slides were had to be translated. It was all in English.
all in English. And I think it's because we were dealing with a very professional group. Like I said, when we went to the male prison, we they had to have an interpreter for us. But normally, when we were interacting with the university students and professors and all that, everybody spoke English.
Okay, and about the university, the enrollment's 20,000. And
Yes,
would you happen to know kind of like the demographics, the breakdown of the students?
I don't, but I know it really is an international university, is my understanding, drawing from all over East Africa, Ethiopia, and other East African countries.
Okay, and
We're,
one
we're
final
fortunate
question.
that excuse me, we're fortunate that we also have Ben. So Ben, feel free to jump in too if you want to add anything.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kirby. Yeah, KIU, Kampala International University. The particular campus that we were at is um, is their medical school. So it focuses on primarily medical students. So they're doctors, nurses, pharmacists, business people associated with medicine. But they've grown. And actually, when we were there last with Carey, we were introduced. They have a whole new engineering school, which is, as Carey was saying, I got to speak to a bunch of engineering students, and I'm an engineer, so that was great. Um, and demographics wise, the young people there, like Carey says, they all speak English and they're really smart. And they're learning all these different disciplines, and you know, it's exciting because so many of those disciplines, especially at the campus in Ishaka, we can tie it into so much RTB material. So a lot of what Carey was presenting, he could have equally presented as an RTB presentation. And so we've really benefited uh, with that and being able to share what we've gained from RTB with these African brothers and sisters has been great. I will say too that the mix of men and women at the university is pretty even. It's really exciting. There's a lot of really smart women, and Carrie pointed out one, little Polly there. Yeah, she is a firecracker, and I would say I don't know if it's half, but it's close to 50% of our students in the training courses that we teach in apologetics are women, and we're starting to focus more and more connecting the women in apologetics in Africa with the actual organization here in the States, which is doing really great to raise more women in apologetics.
Okay, and one final question. Is not knowing Uganda, the geography, is there a particular reason why the university is in a small town like Ishaka? Is it maybe because of the resources or, I mean,
Yeah, I
it's
can
not a
answer
big
that.
town.
So it's actually a private university. So
Uh-huh.
it's the largest private university, and the main campus is in Kampala. And I think they put it there for a couple reasons. One is they got a really good deal on land to build to build their buildings there.
Okay.
Another reason is that there's government subsidies to try and provide that high level education out in the rural areas of Western Uganda.
Oh, okay.
So I think those are the main reasons. It's actually pretty close to Rwanda too. So there's a lot of Rwandan students that come up, Congolese students, Sudan, uh, Tanzania, Kenya, Zambia, all over, very international. So it's about, I would say about 50% Ugandan and 50% other Africans. I will also say that the president, the founder of it, is a Muslim. So it's a privilege that we have to be able to go on campus, preach the gospel through apologetics on a campus that is run by a Muslim.
Mhm. Thank you.
Carl, I think you're next.
Okay, I was just wondering, in terms of apologetics, are there specific apologetics topics that the students there are interested in, or does it kind of run the gamut, or is there specific things they're mostly interested in?
Well, they were definitely interested in Bridget and her talk on human sexuality. That was something that they were really turned on to hear about the biblical
Hmm.
view on human sexuality. But other topics, like when I taught on transmutation of species, one student said they really enjoyed that, how I talked about genetic and epigenetic reasons why transmutation of species doesn't work.
Hmm.
And so those types of topics, but when the Ben can chip in too, but the course that's taught by Apologetics on Missions covers a lot of general topics like world views, what is truth, philosophical reasons for the existence of God, the reliability of the Bible. There's a book called The Apologetics of Jesus, and we have a class on that, the resurrection, and on and on. So it's supposed to be a survey of different apologetic topics. And then Apologetics Uganda is developing their own course. And that would be great. They would be able to teach people more locally instead of, and that would be wonderful with Apologetics on Mission if they could, develop their own training course and give their own certificates.
Hmm.
Is that it, Carl? You have anything else?
That's it.
Okay. Randy, how about you?
Yeah, I was just curious if you had any resistance. And if you felt safe the whole time. I know there's some border issues down there. Did you get resistance from any Muslim students, anything like that?
No, I have never encountered any resistance. It's interesting you mentioned resistance because I do talk with atheists on Facebook, and there I get, called all kinds of names, that I have a brain that's like a cabbage, but all kinds of things. But in Uganda, I never have met anybody who wanted to argue with me or be antagonistic, and I felt safe the whole time. I think Ishaka is about 2 hours from Congo, and we did see some Congolese refugees in Rwanda. when we were there, briefly in Rwanda, but I never felt unsafe anywhere. And of course, I always stuck with the group. I didn't go off by myself and get into anywhere that would be dangerous.
Good. It sounded like a really wonderful experience. Thank you.
Yes.
Anyone else? Oh, go ahead, Sabina.
There.
Thank you. So, Kirk and I were both puzzled, and others probably will be, when you shared how in Uganda at Easter
Oh,
they
yeah.
present the story of Jacob and Laban. And it's
Yes.
like, okay,
What's that
it's
have
an
to do with Easter?
it's an interesting
Yes.
situation and kind of a long interaction that takes place in the Bible between those two guys. But we were both like, why at Easter?
Yeah, I don't understand why it's at Easter. I would like to find out. But yes, they call it, I'm trying to remember the word they used that Laban called the pile of rocks, something like Jaeger Sedutha, and uh, Jacob in his language called it Gilead. So it's really reference to that treaty between the two of them, and why it ties in with Good Friday and Easter, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Ben, you want to step in
Yeah,
on that one?
I think it just coincided with where the church in general happened to be in their sermon series, right?
Hmm.
So it just landed.
Oh.
And I have to say, that church in particular does a great job with their drama productions, as Carey shared. I had the privilege, this was about 5 years ago when I was first starting to work with this team in Uganda. They did a skit on apologetics. And I have to say, they did such an amazing job. It was hilarious because they had parodies of each kind of worldview. Like they had an atheist, they had a Muslim, they had a witch doctor, and then of course they had a Christian. They had a couple other cults, and that drama team did such a good job of in a really funny way representing the distinctives of each worldview and just really satirizing them. So yeah, it was pretty cool. But I think, this particular production landed on a relatively obscure Bible story on Easter just because it was in the flow of their normal teaching.
Sure, that makes sense. Okay. I
Randy,
mean,
your
there
hand is
is a
still up.
tree at Easter too, but I don't know if that's the only, if it were intentional, that's the only thing I can think of.
Randy, your hand is still up, or did you have another question?
No, I just like attention.
I'm sorry?
I said, no, I just like attention.
Okay. So Carey, I was gonna, anybody else? I mean, I have a couple of questions myself, but so what about how is there a problem with HIV, a particular problem with HIV in Uganda?
I'm not aware. I am an epidemiologist, but to be honest, I haven't kept up since retirement. But generally in Africa, there are places where HIV is more prevalent, but I would have to look up more specifically about Uganda.
Okay, but that really didn't come up during the your presentation.
I can speak a little bit to that. So 6 years ago, 7 years ago, it was a major problem. It's been, gotten such a lot of attention that it's really been managed pretty well. So it's a lot less prevalent. However, the effects of previous, 10 years ago are still with the culture today. So there's still a lot of orphans as a result of that. Parents didn't make it. And so yeah, the implications have been profound, but it's getting better. it's getting better and it's much more under control.
Another question I was going to ask, it's about transsexualism. Is there much of a movement in Uganda that you could sense and particularly I'm worried about kids, adolescents who are, and this in the U.S. It's a practically well, I don't know, it's an epidemic of young women who are wanting, and many of them minors who are opting for surgery to change their sex, to try to change their sex. Is this an issue in Uganda that you heard about?
Yes, we have heard from Moses, the president of Apologetics Uganda, and others in the organization that it's coming, and unfortunately, it's coming because of the West. The United States and Western Europe are having an influence, and unfortunately, a negative influence
Mhm.
upon the Ugandan society. I don't think that transgenderism has yet is a big problem, but it's coming. And it's like you can hear the footsteps of, of the influence from the West coming to Uganda and other African nations. I think it's much more of a problem I hear in South Africa
Mhm.
than other African nations, but it's coming.
Mhm. And then a final question that I had is your ministry of apologetics on mission and Uganda apologetics. It seems to be focused on the higher level students, medical students and pharmacists, but what about the rest of Uganda that, where the I imagine there's probably a fairly significant amount of poverty going on, and I'm wondering, are you aware of any ministries that go to outside of this high class group that you are ministering to now?
Yeah,
And I guess I could ask Ben as well, so to respond to that.
well, yes, the first thing I would mention is in my presentation, I talked about the D house, where there are three men that are involved in street children. So, yes, there is a ministry. One of the three men, Isaac, who's a pharmacist, has a particular affinity for children, and the
Mm,
other two do, but they are concerned about, people like street children,
mhm,
and they do want to reach all classes. But it's amazing that it is spreading. Apologetics Uganda is reaching to other parts of Uganda,
mm,
and it's kind of a slow growth, but I think somehow that's good. Good that they're not just trying to overextend themselves, and they're cooperating with other ministries out there. And so I think that's great that they're cooperating, like with Ratio Christi and other types of organizations. So
mhm,
they are trying to reach more people. But in Yashaka, yes, it is more of a higher class education.
mhm. Okay.
Yeah, Kirby, that's a great question. And so it's part of our strategy actually is we're a small ministry. And so when we go, we actually do speak to a lot of high schools and lay churches. We'll come in and introduce people, make them aware of what apologetics is. But really the work on the ground really needs to be done by people, that we train there. So we're training the trainers. And so we do a lot better if we train the trainers, equip them so that then they can go out and and really speak in a way that connects with the local people there. And they just have a lot more uh, ability to be there on the ground all the time going around. And that's why we're so grateful to see Apologetics Uganda really thrive because there's like, you know, apologetics is a totally new thing in Africa. Honestly, I mean, it's kind of, you know, even in the States, people don't know much about it, but at least they kind of know. If you talk to the average person at church, they have some idea. But in Africa, it's really new, so it's really exciting to see it take off, and it's really, you know, one of the cool things that Carrie and I took away from the last time we were there together is they're seeing the topic of apologetics, this conversations about the questions and the answers and all that stuff is really, you know, lit a fire under them for the gospel, for Jesus.
Yes.
They're just excited about Jesus because it's exciting about talking to him in the context of apologetics. And so they're sharing that, you know, with their fellow countrymen, and that's what we want to see.
Yeah. And one other thing, they do have a children's ministry. There's a person named Linda, and earlier this spring she had a children's conference, and more than 200 students, children, showed up for that one-day conference. So there is a children's component to Apologetics Uganda.
Yes, Sabina again.
Yeah. So why Uganda rather than another country in Africa?
Because they're responsive. I mean, there are other nations like South Africa has an apologetics ministry. That's where Professor David Block is in RTB in South Africa. Kenya has a group that's going, other nations, but Uganda has just responded so much to our efforts by Apologetics on Mission. And probably Ben can say more to that, but they are just on fire.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to pick up on that question a little bit too. But Ben, did you have something to say?
No, go ahead. I do have
Well,
something to say, but why don't you go ahead and
yeah,
pick up on it?
yeah, because I'm picking up on the idea. You know, I'm thinking of so many other countries, especially in Western Africa, are beset with Muslim terrorists like Boko
Mhm.
Haram, and you know, you haven't even touched on that problem in Uganda, which
Well,
I would
so
imagine that it exists in Uganda too, but maybe not
so
to the extent that it does in Western Africa.
so Kirby, I'm gonna take advantage of this to put on my, you know, my ministry leadership hat and say, yes, the world globally needs apologetics. Um, Sabina, the Lord opened the door for me. Now it's coming on 9 years ago in Ishaka, Uganda, for completely different reasons, and that's where the whole idea of taking apologetics on mission to places that have, you know, zero awareness and very little resources to learn about it. So we've spread across Africa. So I was just in Zimbabwe about a month ago. We've been to Rwanda, we've been to South Africa, Zambia, Nigeria, and all those regions need apologetics. We've expanded beyond Africa. So we were in Croatia earlier this year. A gentleman that maybe some of you remember. Do you guys remember Doug Kyle? Do you guys remember Doug Kyle? Kirby, yeah, you're nodding your head. So
Well,
Doug,
yeah, and I didn't. Well, yeah, I didn't actually interface with Doug while he was here. I know Kirk did, but
okay, well,
Kirk
Kirk,
is
maybe you,
probably the only one that goes back that far.
okay. Well, anyway, yeah, Doug is now in Portland, and he and I did a lot of work for RTB up here in Portland, but he's since become kind of the Carey Smoak for Taiwan. So we've been to Taiwan 3 times, and as you might know, Doug's wife is from Taiwan. So
Mhm.
we're doing apologetics work there. You guys might know Cynthia and her
Chung,
husband, yeah, Chung and her husband. They're working with us now informally. And so we're doing work in Taiwan. So the whole world needs apologetics. So what I hope you guys get out of Carey's great story and testimony is, he's found, he retired 4 years ago and now he's found himself doing apologetics in Africa. Who would ever thought, right, Carey? Who would have ever thought? So I would encourage any of you, the world needs you. You all have an affinity to apologetics in some form or another. And, if the Lord stirs your heart and you think, man, I'd love to be able to impart some apologetics to my brothers and sisters in Africa, in East Europe, in South America, anywhere around the world where they're not quite as privileged as we are in the West to have, the resources like RTB and Stand to Reason and Reasonable Faith and all these great ministries. Get a hold of us. You guys all know how to get a hold of Carey. You can find me. Apologetics on Mission is easy to find. We'd love to talk to you. And if you want to go with us, like Carey has gone, talk to us. If you want to, maybe if you've got some presentation stuff that you've developed over the years and you want to present, they're always hungry for that. If you want to be a lecturer for some of our courses, we have, openings for that. If you want to pray with us, we need that. So, and if Kirby, thanks for speaking up for Carey. All this stuff takes money, and we're not in it for the money, but it does take money. So please, if you want to see Carey continue to thrive there and support what's happening there, he needs funds, and we're here to support Carey in the work that he does with us, and so every little bit helps. So there you go. That's my pitch, and it's super exciting. If you want to get excited about the gospel and apologetics, take it internationally, and they are hungry for it. That's one of the things that is so joyful. Carey can testify. These believers are so excited about learning this whole new area of their faith. So cool stuff.
I
Yes.
think it's probably time for us to close this meeting. It seems a little early, but we had a great session from Carey, and I really appreciate it. Carey, thank you very much for your presentation.
You're welcome.
And wonder if we might ask you, Carey, to close this meeting with a word of prayer.
Dear Father, I just thank you and praise you for this day, God, and help us to live each day lives that would honor and bring glory to your name. Help us, Lord, to be active in sharing our faith and using apologetics, God, to bring people to faith in Jesus Christ. And I pray, God, for Uganda. I thank you, Lord, for the great influence they're having and with the gospel. And I pray that you strengthen the Ugandan Christians to be even more bold in their witnessing, God. And I pray, God, this would spread to other nations, even to here in the United States, God, and here in the Bay Area. Strengthen churches, God, embolden them to fulfill the Great Commission. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.